Hi, Dave. How are you doing?
Hi, Mike. I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Thanks for joining in this conversation today. I've been aware of the stuff that you've been doing for a while. I've been down to Lancaster to play at Hymns for Robots and various
Absolutely.
events that you put on there. But could you discuss a little bit about who you are? What do you do? How do you make music? Am I right in thinking that you do some stuff with education and teaching as well?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a musician and educator based in Lancaster. A lot of my work is done in schools. I've done loads of over the years with all sorts of workshops, other sort of educational situations. I'm originally a bass player, and I've run
Mhm.
lots of jazz workshops and that sort of thing. I got into doing electronics stuff through writing for a band.
Mhm.
I used to use Sibelius, which is like
Right.
a score
Yeah.
writing program, and the band was getting more and more contemporary, I suppose, and I wanted something that represented the sounds a little bit more rather than just gave the notes, I suppose. And
Yeah.
at that point, I became a bit of a pedal board geek, and I've got a pedal board, bass pedal board the size of a small battleship. And because of that, I felt I needed to have more, I suppose, expressive control when writing rather
Mm.
than just writing out scores for saxophone
Yeah.
players. So I started messing around with different DAWs, and I've tried Cubase, and then I just tried Ableton, and it just went, oh, that's how, yeah, that works. I didn't try lots of different DAWs. I just happened to land on one that spoke
Right.
to me
Right.
second
Yeah.
time out, sort of thing. Then sort of got into using that in the band, playing bass and playing that, and it was very, yeah, very complicated and carrying lots of gear to
Yeah.
gigs.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
very complicated. And then when things went wrong, as things invariably do in live performance, I would just become the bass player. I'll sort the tech out between songs. And so I thought, well, perhaps I need to be able to get better at sorting the tech out
Mhm.
on the fly. So I thought the only way I'm going to do this is if I just perform using the electronic stuff and ditch the bass.
Right.
I started doing that and found I really liked it. And then I think, like a lot of people, COVID happened, and all of a sudden, having a project where you weren't in a band was a helpful thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that really accelerated the deep dive sort of thing.
Mhm.
And for all this time, I've been banging on at work about electronic music and getting that into education because it really lights. I think it's a great accessible point for kids. It
Mhm.
lights people up, and it allows them access to sort of the music that they hear and listen to and are engaged in. The big genesis for me was this. There's this one particular kid who was, and we got him into a lunchtime club, and I showed him a filter, and he just went, "Sorry, that's what it is," because he'd heard the filter on so many records, and he had
Mhm.
no idea about anything that's going on. It
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, I can do that," and that I think that was my all teachers. So, luckily, I got more and more involved in the electronic side. It's become more and more part of my teaching life. And between me and a friend, we thought about this idea of having like a night where you get maybe four bands playing or four acts playing
Mhm.
to make it more of a thing. And I just happened to be in the Golden Line down the road, which I've played many times, chatting to the landlord.
Right.
So I've got this idea for this live electronic music, and he was like, "Let's do that. Do you want to
Yeah.
start next month? Can you do it every month?" And I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, yeah." I wasn't
Yeah. No,
expecting it to
that's
be
good.
that, and that became Hymns for Robots
So
thing.
when was that? Because I was aware of electronic music open mic nights. Kind of, would it be 2019 they started to kind of take off, and then of course COVID locked that down pretty quick.
Yeah,
But
this is
is it in that kind of time span?
yeah. I have in true to form. I have like a list of all the gigs. 30th of May, 2019
Mm.
was
Yeah.
the first one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and unbeknown to me, we had a couple of local guys, and then some more local guys who I one of whom I knew because my son played in a football team with his
Yeah.
son, turned out to be Field Lines cartographer,
Right. Right.
who
Right.
lived 200 yards down the road from me. Another guy from Preston called La French,
Mm-hmm. Whose
uh,
Blind Tack release this
when
week?
it released next week, yeah,
Yeah.
and he's bloody great as well. And he just happened to bring along a mate called Polypores from Preston.
Brilliant.
So
That's a
the first
fantastic
night,
lineup for the first
organised
session,
a
right?
Polypore.
Brilliant.
I was like, I had no idea at that point. It was just like just diving in, and I hadn't spotted the EMOM thing at all
Right.
because I was just
You were kind of doing that
doing
independently.
like,
How cool.
yeah. So I invented EMOM at the same time other people would do. Well, it's a fairly straightforward idea,
Mm.
but it's all sort of pre-booked and pre-organised, and everyone turns up early. Everyone sets up before the public arrive. Everyone gets a sound check. I think that just comes from my having done millions of gigs.
Yeah.
That's what you do in a gig.
Yeah.
You all set up. Then the punters arrive, then you do the gig. So we would just start doing it like that,
Right.
and we just stay doing it like that. I mean, it's a bit of a cramped venue. Played a few of them, and there's some wanted nice big spaces. They can have a big table over there and a big table over there, and it's really easy. We're a little bit more hemmed in. Actually, it's quite a nice experience to set up, relax, blast through the bands, and then finish, sort of thing.
As an artist, you can see the whites of the audience's eyes. You know, it's intimate, right? But that's really nice, because it then doesn't mean that there's a gaping chasm between you playing and the audience sitting at the back of the room.
Absolutely, and we put the tables right front and centre. Yeah, and if you can see the whites of their eyes, Mike, you must be the 1 in 100 electronic musicians who look up.
Fair play. That's a very fair comment.
Never know, only look up. That's my motto. And the other thing I like that sort of setup is that it's really helpful for people who've not done gigs before, because they get to come set up in an environment where there's no one looking at them apart from people who are being helpful, hopefully. If things go a little bit wrong, there's plenty of time to sort it all out. And I really like, and that comes through, community music. Yeah. Educational background is helping people through their first gigs, sort of thing. And we did one, it was May or April this year. All 3 acts were doing their first ever gig.
Oh, nice. Nicely.
Well, I was right. I think that's the first time that ever happened. So that's quite cool. I typically don't say it's people's first gigs until after they're played, because I don't want to, it often feels like a bit of you try to lower people's expectations. Yeah. I don't worry about this one, like, it's their first gig, because I don't like that message, sort of thing. Yeah. I like to say afterwards, when you then celebrate how good it was, and it was their first gig. One of the great things about doing electronic music is I think when you perform live, it can be the dynamic with you and your equipment isn't that dissimilar to when you're at home. Yeah. In the rehearsal space. So actually, if you can do it at home, you could probably do it live. Yeah.
And you as an artist then, Guerilla Biscuits.
Yes.
I've seen you play a couple of times, and it always strikes me that you're big on improvisation. So does that come out of your previous life as a bass player in a band? Was that kind of improv jazz? Are you bringing that forward into your electronic performance? Or was that always there?
It's been like an osmosis, I suppose. I'm trying to think of the first gig was like a duo with the keyboard player in the band I was in at the time that I was talking about earlier. And that was quite improvised. We'd set some stuff up and just sort of jam. Right. And that was sort of pre-Guerilla Biscuits, I suppose. Then when Guerilla Biscuits happened, I started doing a lot of scene launching and that sort of thing. It was okay, but I didn't really... I kept moving on. I'd do something, and then I'd do it a couple of times. I go, and it didn't quite resonate. I'd done this a couple of times, and then I spent loads of effort. I was trying to think of ways of approaching performance, and I spent loads of time and effort making this set, and I had loads of bits where you could cycle stuff around and change and blah blah blah, and I'd nicked some of the Rachel Hickley beef up track idea sort of thing. That was in there. I spent ages working. I finished the first gig with it. I was like, didn't like that at all.
All right.
Bin. It just didn't feel for me like I was playing live, sort of thing. Yeah. It just didn't work for me. And I know it works for lots of people, and I'm not. It's just for me. I just wasn't feeling it at all. So the broad concept is there's loads of generative devices set up in the computer.
Yep.
I trigger, but they're controllable. They've got parameters in them that I can control. So I start to control those devices until something accidental happens. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, I'll respond with another device to that. So I'm listening. Something goes off, then I go to something else, respond to what's going on. Mm-hmm. Then maybe change the first thing, then maybe bring something else in. And then so there's a mixture of me controlling generative stuff and it firing off. And then I'll also do some live playing and programming. So all the drums are programmed live. So they're all there's the empty clips ready to go, but there's no MIDI in them, sort of thing. So I kick off the generative stuff, then play some stuff or sequence some stuff. The bass is often played live, although there is some generative tools on the bass as well. I'm trying to make a jazz band, I suppose. There's also in improv stuff, if somebody does something you like, you can sort of give them a signal to keep doing that thing, and control that sort of thing. So that's just one way of doing it. So I suppose I'm sort of doing that. And I've loopers on 8 tracks, so I'm always riffing and then recording.
Right.
and so I record loops. So I'm sort of using generative stuff to create improvised composition on the fly, I suppose.
Yeah. Other conversations, we've kind of talked about how generative tools, let's say, are like invisible bandmates. And it sounds very much like that with what you're doing. But it's interesting because you're doing it not just kind of in the studio, but in a live context.
While also trying to build some piece of thing worth listening to over a period of time.
Right.
So weird level, it's become quite big and epic sort of thing. So everything's like 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
Doing less than 20 feels like a real push. So I could get through what you need to get through. I need to come with some shame for doing less than 20, but
it's interesting though hearing you say that, because the times I've heard you do that, it's not like, well, you've got to wait 5 minutes for Dave to find the bit he likes.
Yeah.
You've got stuff or systems there prepped and ready that will generate stuff that's largely where you want it to be, and then you bounce off that, right?
yeah, things get coherent quite quickly. The tools have been built over time. It's like I spent a lot of time hacking Ableton's MIDI devices to make them do things, and I spent a whole summer building some probability tool using stock Ableton MIDI devices, and then Ableton introduced probability into it. It's like, yeah, it's great.
Thanks.
But actually, well, I still prefer my way because I can change it on the fly. I've got 100% control on the fly, and it's sort of like a mixture of something I built and then something I nicked off NetRush.
Right.
And then the one I've ended up with is like a hybrid between mine and NetRush's sort of thing.
That's one thing that I think is great about Live and the whole ecosystem, using their Lego pieces, as it were. You kind of build your own that works for you and your context and the thing you want to do.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. My partner often says, I come out, I've done something went wrong and I've just spent all this time fixing it. She went, but that's what you like most, isn't it? Is when you get a problem and you have to try and find a way around that problem. It's like, maybe I should have got a proper job and been a systems engineer or something like that.
Some people tinker with cars and we tinker with probability systems.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I think you were one of the first people to really dig into the Lazy Producer book. And also you had curated a collection of tracks produced by folks from the Emotion Wave Discord. It was interesting for me to hear how you had interpreted some of the stuff in there, and also how these other people had similarly taken those ideas and used them to produce their own tracks. Because one of the things that I kind of wanted was not, this is the way, but here's a recipe or here's an idea that you could then take and use whatever way you want.
And so one of the things I liked about it straight away was the different bits of it. It's not all one thing. You got tools. I can't remember the section now. There's some things labeled
recipes,
tools,
process.
Something labeled process. That's right. And there's different. So it's very, very clear, I think, or very obvious. It was obvious to me that it wasn't a how-to manual. It was read this and get some ideas.
Were you surprised by the tracks that came out?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised with mine. Funnily enough, I was happy with it, but I wasn't surprised by it, sort of thing. What I loved the fact that, so Emotion Wave is a Discord we're both in, set up by Neil Gradlow 5. It's a really lovely community, and it was really nice. People jumped in and wanted to get involved, and it was really interesting to hear the different things. Theoretically, no surprise that the more successful tracks, I suppose, were the ones where people were coming from that sort of background anyway.
Right.
But my favourite tracks were the ones that people who never done anything like this before went, I'm going to have a go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, and interestingly, the next Emotion Wave compilation was a breakbeats one, which I've never done.
Right.
And it came at a pretty busy time. It wasn't a great time for me to contribute something, but I gave it a few goes and I just came with an absolute load of pants. It was really hard. I just couldn't do it. It was rubbish. Right. And it's just like, so it's really gave me a really nice, a better appreciation, I suppose, of the people that had got stuck in, that hadn't done this sort of stuff before with the Generations compilation. They'd done a bit from it not being their thing, because I completely failed to make anything remotely coherent and didn't submit for the Breaks compilation. One of my favourite things about the compilation was that obviously the book's called The Lazy Producer, and the original idea was to tie it in with the release of your Lazy Producer album, and fantastically, we've got to end up coming out like 20 months ahead of you.
Yeah.
You're ultimately the lazy producer because
Yeah.
you're so lazy your album didn't even come out when it was supposed to. It's coming out like a year and a half later.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That'd be brilliant, but it just bill on the on the
Well,
brand.
I think, to be fair, you got ahead of the curve absolutely, because it's probably 18 months since I kicked that idea to you, and that was a very early version of the book. I think I had large numbers of the tracks kind of started, but you know how it is when you're trying to pull an album together and you then sit down with them in anger and you're looking at them and going, there's elements of that I'd want to tweak. It's not quite ready for release. But yeah, I put the lazy in the lazy producer, that's for sure.
Yeah. My two favorite lazy things are then, which aren't generative but super lazy, is everything gets recorded to 2-track.
Right.
I hadn't made anything for about 2 years. I was chatting to Stephen on a gig, and he just was talking about his recording process, and I just thought, you know what, I just need to try that. And a lot of what I do is play live, is improvise, develop stuff and play live. It fitted with that sort of delivery mechanism as well.
I decided I need to simplify, because other people are producing lots of albums and tracks and stuff, and it seems to take me inordinate amounts of time to try and refine and mix and refine and mix and refine and mix again. So, I quite envy people who can just bounce to 2 tracks and we're done.
Yeah, bounce to 2 tracks. You do chat to Stevie, does like versions. He comes up with a concept for a track, does loads of versions of it, and then
commits.
There's still a lot of work in it, but it's the work in a different place to the, I finished it now, I just need to, or do I drop that out there, or do I wait another 4 bars to drop it out? I mean, the cheeky thing I do sometimes is go through, and if there's a bit where it has meandered a bit, I might cut out 16 bars.
Got it. Yeah.
Get together, sort of thing.
And what was your other lazy feature?
It was printing to 2-track, and only doing EPs.
Only doing EPs. I think that's brilliant. Yeah, I'm all for that. That's my new mantra. Forget the marathon of trying to do an album.
I don't think I could conceptually come up with an album. It just feels too much. Or could just do 4 really long EP tracks.
One of the other things that I was interested in, my feeling is that when people get into this, generative music creation stuff, whether it's ambient or not, one of the things that drove me to write the book in the first place, it seems awfully pretentious to write a book, but people were coming to me and saying, I've tried doing generative stuff, but it just sounds random and rubbish. And I was keen to then kind of go, well, okay, but are you just leaving all that probability stuff in there? Or do you kind of curate and garden and tidy and put some of the random stuff into context with others, or pick phrases or bits you like? And so that kind of drove why I actually committed it all to one place, was because I thought it would be helpful to people to provide that kind of, here's some guardrails or some ideas to kind of stop you from just going off the cliff of it's all random and nonsense. I hope that came across, but have you experienced that, or speaking to other people, have you seen that as a problem of people getting lost in the weeds of the randomness?
Yeah, I think people are put off by that, but there's some quite easy, and then this exists, not obviously exists in software, but it also exists in hardware as well. There's loads of quantized tools that could just keep things tidy. I think even if you just adhere to those, if you get a scale quantize, a clock quantize, and help you, all of a sudden everything will just sound sort of ordered, and you don't have to use those. You don't have to use those things, particularly the clock. I know I'm pretty much wedded to having everything clock quantized, but I know some people can let things like that go better than I can. And the scale quantize thing is I suppose super helpful and nice and accessible if you've not got loads of musical knowledge as well.
Yeah.
But also the computers then, or the hardware is control, is keeping things within a garden for you, I suppose, which is nice. And what I tend to have is that turned on everything that's generative, but turned off the things I can play.
Right.
So if I'm playing something live, I can play things that aren't in the scale.
That's nice, because then that's kind of the stuff that you play manually could be the bits that are scrunchy and slightly dissonant, and
and it gives you access to chromaticism.
Yeah.
If you've ever played in jazz bands, particularly if you're for improvising bands, we're a jazz band, but bands that do a lot of improvised stuff, particularly if you're a bass player, you quite early on realise that you've got to be quite careful with the notes you play. Even when you're improvising, you can't, if it's a melodic, not free improv, but if it's improvised music that has some sort of harmonic understanding within itself, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there are some proper signs in it, but the lower you go, the less you can get away with notes that are wrong,
Right.
or the harder it is to get away with notes that are wrong. It was super genius players will still get away with it, but molds, you got to be really quite careful. But the higher in pitch you go, the easier it is to play notes that are crunchy.
Yeah.
So typically, if I'm playing bass stuff, I won't necessarily play crunchy notes, but I will use chromaticism, which is one of the difficult things, I suppose. If you've got everything locked into scales, you do lose that chromatic, which can sound super cool. But if I'm playing high melodic stuff, then I'll play nasty notes as well.
The kind of chromatic passing tones, that chromatic note is fine as long as you resolve it to here or here.
Yeah.
If you just keep hammering that one, it's like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
The other thing that I love about these whole systems, having come from bass end of things like you, is that often the choice of bass notes actually contextualizes all the other generated stuff. So you can have a generative world that's going on and producing stuff that doesn't sound particularly interesting, but the minute you add in a bass note and imply a chord movement, suddenly you've got something.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very powerful place to be, which I think is why you've got to be super careful with the notes. Is part of it is the power of it.
Yeah. The other thing that I've played with as part of Teus, the first album had no drums in it. And so I could then use some of those kind of higher frequency things almost percussively, almost to imply a rhythm or to do something. And then, if you like, the bass part provided that impetus, that kind of movement, that, engine, if you like, that didn't necessarily, it's not like a kick drum, right? But it's just that kind of, it moves you forward, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. So with Teus, do you have band roles?
Well, kind of by accident, because Ali produces his stems from his modular rig, and sometimes those are rhythmic, or, it's an art part, or there's movement to it, or maybe there's kind of just in the sequence of things that are happening, I kind of latch on to, well, there is maybe unstructured or not deliberate beats to it, but there is a little bit of tempo and kind of pulse, if you like. Then I kind of emphasize that by what I layer on top. So it's more reacting to what Ali's doing rather than Ali's always doing this role. And that's kind of deliberate in terms of how we set up things. In previous Taste albums, Ali has produced these stems of 4-6 minutes, whatever they are, puts them onto a USB stick and hands the stick to me, and then I produce a track. And I try to use the whole stem kind of as the tune or as the backbone to the tune. We're moving more towards, I guess, a little bit like what you do with the improv stuff, because we would like to do things with the small boxes we have, like Ableton Move, Torso Electronics S4, Polyensin, things like that, where we can try to do something similar in that we'll start from an idea and then we layer on things that go with, but try to do that where it's not just from the modular rig to Ableton. So we can kind of react to what each other's doing.
A bit more backwards and forwards. He'll put down a part, you'll put down a part, then he'll put down a part that goes with his part and your part.
That's it.
Sort of things that you're building up.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the reasons I call the things in the book recipes is it's a bit like cookery recipes where you can try it and go, nah, it's not for me. I didn't like that one. But on the other hand,
I'll sub out this. I'm not that keen on
coriander.
No, I'll stick. Yeah, it tastes like soap, coriander. So I'll stick something else instead.
Will it work with parsnip?
Yeah. Or I will pass it accidentally, so it's going in.
Exactly. But in music, well, okay. I think maybe that's a good place to stop, Dave. And thanks so much for your contribution and discussion. And
Thank you.